Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this online sharpening course. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Clotilde, and I work at Deppeler in Switzerland, where we manufacture our dental instruments. Let me introduce our speaker tonight, Sabine Hoffman, Sales and Marketing Manager at Deppeler as well. Among her many skills, Sabine is an expert in sharpening. She has been giving classes to dental professionals and students for many years. If you have questions during the webinar, you can use the Q&A or the chat section on Zoom. There will be a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the course. Also, this webinar is recorded, and so you will be able to access it later if you missed anything or if you would like to rewatch it. So now I will hand over to Sabine, who will start the course.
Okay, thank you very much, Clotilde, for your presentation, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to give this course because you are so many registered people, and it's the first time I do it in front of so many people at once. So a few words about me. I'm with Deppeler for over 10 years now. And before that, I was at hotel school in Lausanne. And we also had a sharpening course once. It was a long time ago, and it was about half an hour, I think. And I remember one thing of this sharpening course is that you always have to sharpen your knives along the blade, and you have to straighten up the string of the knife. In French, it's of course very nicely said. You say redresser le fil de la lame. And I don't know why, but it kept into my mind all the time. And when it came to sharpening dental instruments, it stayed. And I think it's really one thing you can keep in mind, because this is all about our method. It's straightening up the string of the cutting edge. So let's begin. So I will go fast through a little agenda. I will speak first a little bit about the raw material, so the steel, the manufacturing process, the reprocessing of instruments, because there are many things happening between two patients. I will not speak about hygiene, but more how to prevent the damaging of instruments. Then I will go deeper into sharpening, presenting the differences between the traditional sharpening with our way of sharpening, the new technology of instruments that you don't have to sharpen, etc., etc. So as Clotilde said before, don't hesitate to make questions. We will certainly respond to them at the end of the session. So the steel, our raw material, is a material that depends on the alloy. The quality depends on the alloy, the heat treatment, and the manufacturing process. The alloy is basically the recipe of the steel, so what ingredients are inside. The heat treatment will define the final quality, the hardness, and the or the softness of it. You can change things with the heat treatment. And of course, the manufacturing process will define the end quality of it. So our specific steel, because I speak of what I know, is of course a real medical steel, which should be actually the case for any instruments used in the dental field. It has no allergen substances, so no nickel inside. And the structure is close to wood. So actually, the raw material are long bars, really long bars of 2 meters. So they have been melted into a form. And the melting, the liquid steel into this form will form small structure inside that will be very close to wood. And so this will also define a little bit how to sharpen them to make them really as efficient as possible. It's very resistant after hardening. And what I like, what I'm also proud of it, it's quite unique to Deppeler, because Mr. Deppeler, a long time ago, he had the opportunity to make a monopole on this alloy. And so we actually are the only one who have exactly this, this alloy, this steel. The manufacturing process is always respecting the steel, which is again similar to wood. So everything is done in this direction. When we sharpen instruments, it's in the direction of the steel. I like to take wood as example also because if you would polish wood, you always go with the structure of it, because if you go on the other way around, you will make burrs and teeth. And this is the same with the steel actually. So as long as you sharpen along the blade, along the structure, it will be much smoother. And the other thing, the temperature, they have to be under control during the whole process of manufacturing, because if you heaten up too much one piece, especially when you bend them or you have to remove material, it creates heat. It could change the quality of it at that point. And if you don't have the same hardness all through the instrument, you will have pieces that are soft, pieces that are hard, soft, hard, and so on. And so you will have a higher risk of instruments to break or to bend or not to communicate. So that's why it's very important to have this control of temperatures during the whole process of manufacturing. Then, of course, the precision. We are a Swiss company known for watchmaking. Precision is a very Swiss particularity. So precision is all the process, during all the process of manufacturing, from the beginning to the end. Also because if you have small differences at the beginning, you will have big differences at the end, and it's impossible to correct them. So that's why it's very important, and every instrument is controlled visually and mechanically at each step of production. And of course, sharpening, as I said, it's along the blade and along this structure. And what I like most is how many hands are in this company, and people who are working and creating these instruments are all behind my office. So I see them every day, and it's a nice feeling to be able to work for a company like that. So that was a little marketing tip. The hardening is the final step. It's important because you have to make the instruments hard, but not too hard. If you create an instrument that's too hard, it will be quite resistant. It will stay sharp longer, of course. But if it's hard, you will lose some tactility, and there is a higher risk of breakage. The harder it is, the higher risk of breakage you have. It's like if you have glass, for example, it's not very, I mean, it's resistant, but if there is it can break very easily. But it will not get blunt or something like that. So what we are looking for when we harden our steel is a good mix between strength, hardness, and flexibility. So this is about our production. So if you're in the region one time, don't hesitate to drop an email or call us, and we can arrange a visit. We always like to open our doors to dentists, dental hygienists, and so on. So let's come to the reprocessing cycles and the mistakes you can avoid or basically avoid to damage the instruments. So first of all, what can happen to instruments during this phase is corrosion, oxidation, heat, I mean melting or too much heat. And mostly this is because of the disinfection products. It can be because of the water, the way of cleaning. And before sterilizations, it's very important to control and maintain the instruments. So that's where the sharpening comes in. The corrosion is something you will not see immediately, or unless you look at them very often with the loupe, because corrosion can occur through little cracks, and the first thing you will see are little black stains on the tip of the instrument, for example, and the corrosion will occur inside the instrument, and suddenly the tip will fall without any force, of course. And the reason for this to happen can be chlorine in the water, for example, because chlorine is very corrosive. It can come from the disinfection products that can be very aggressive. And especially if the instrument falls or there is small cracks because they collide with other instruments, then the products can really go inside and create this corrosion. Oxidation is more as an aesthetic problem because it comes mainly from other products, instruments that are not in stainless steel or of bad quality. And what happens basically is that the rust will spread over everything that's in this thermal disinfector, for example. It happens also in the washing machine. It happened to me, for example. I had cutlery that was not in stainless steel, and I had oxidation. I had rust on everything in my washing machine. So it took some time until everything was clean again. So if you have instruments that are stained, it's probably because of an instrument or a piece of steel that is not stainless steel. Finally, the heat. As I said before, the heat will change the quality of the steel, but you will not see that unless you have instruments with a silicone grip or a plastic grip that supports a little bit less of the heat than steel itself. But for example, here it melted and the temperature was over 170 because this is the temperature where the handle begins to melt. And actually controlling the quality of the steel, we find out that it changed the hardness. So if you have instruments where the handle becomes to change, it might be because of the temperature of the sterilizator. Usually shouldn't happen, as the reglementation is that it shouldn't be more than 134 degrees. So I come back to the disinfection product because this is one of the things that can corrode instruments. And it's very important to read the product's instructions of use. And the two main things are the concentration and the immersion time. Concentration is often 4% or something like that. It's very small. And the immersion time is mostly half an hour or even quarter of an hour, depending of the product. And it shouldn't be more. I know that mostly instruments are immersed much longer. As long as they don't change, as long as they are okay, it can be okay. but it is a risk that they become damaged. The handle can change color, they can get corroded, and that's not good. So please look at the product's instructions of use. It's very important. And I know how it is. I'm the first in my house that when I have a product, a cleaning product, I use whatever it comes, and maybe it's a bit too much, but never mind. But for the dental instruments, it's important to keep that in mind and to follow the instructions of use. And once you have immersed them in the disinfection product, you have to wash it out. Very important to wash everything out, because if you put them into the sterilizer and there is still disinfection product on it, it will burn inside the instrument, and again it can damage it, it can change color, it doesn't look like anymore, look nice anymore, etc., etc. And in order to wash them out, be careful not to turn the bin over into the sink like on the image, but treat them carefully. They are fragile. They are resistant, but they are still fragile. You have thin probes, you have instruments that are sharp, they can lose their sharpness if they collide. So the best is to treat them as carefully as possible, like fine china. And for your own safety, always wear sturdy gloves in order not to hurt yourself. And finally, to wash them correctly, because sometimes you have some rests of meat or composite, but do not use a wire brush. The reason is, first, for the sharp instruments, it will get them dull. And for the composite instruments, you could scratch them. And if you have flat spatulas with scratches on it, the composite will really stick to it. So don't use a wire brush to wash them, to wash the composite instruments if they have some composite left. The first thing is to remove it with a cloth just in front of the patient, so it's not hard. And in case you have hard composite on your flat plastic, remove them with a cloth. You can push a little bit more between two fingers, or with your nail, and then it pops out, it goes out. It really doesn't stick so much. I've tried it many times, and it's not so bad. It doesn't stick so much on the instrument. And once instruments are okay, they are clean, they are all well, it's important to look at them. It's always good to have a loop at that moment. And that's also the moment where you have to sharpen them. And before sterilization, also be sure the instruments are dry, because again, if you have water drops on them, it will make stains on the instruments when it's in the sterilizer. So this is about the reprocessing. I hope I could give you some inputs about that. For all the hygiene part, there are other courses from other people that do them very well. And probably you know a lot more than myself. So I'm sure you've seen this kind of image, because this is the traditional way of sharpening. So basically you have a guide, you can put it at the table and hold the instrument straight. I mean, the first shaft has to be straight, and then you move the stone back and forth. And basically it looks a little bit like this. So you have your first shaft straight, and you put your angle with the stone, and then you put force when you go down and no when you go up, in order to avoid a little bit the burrs, but you still do. And you end up with this kind of result. So you have facets on the instruments, you have serrated blades, especially if you use a rough stone. So actually, it's quite normal that studies find out that actually no one can sharpen because you have a loss of material, you have burrs that could end up into the gum and prevent from healing, you have a ribbled blade, clawing teeth giving bacteria, beautiful hiding places, and it will change the geometry. So this way of sharpening is really difficult. And even if you do it perfectly right, and I've seen some that are really nice, the results, but you will still be against the cutting edge. And in that way, you cannot straighten up the string of the blade. So that's not the good, it's not the best solution. And as no one can sharpen because everyone learns that way, it's logical that some companies decided to make instruments that you don't have to sharpen. I mean, they protected the blade, because if you sharpen that way, you will damage more than what you have at the beginning. And actually, when you protect a blade, it means you put a coating, a surface over a sharp edge, which actually means that the sharp edge will be probably less sharp than at the beginning. So in order to compensate this loss of sharpness because of the coating, you probably will have instruments that are a little bit more aggressive, with a little bit sharper angle of the cutting edge. But of course, it helps. You will have, you cannot sharpen them and they will stay like this for much longer time. That's of course. But a study about this in Zurich evaluated 3 curettes with edge retention technology. So actually the American Eagle and the U3D average, and compared with our normal steel. And the results were quite interesting because after 1,000 strokes on bovine dentin, the 3 instruments have a slight loss of efficacy and very similar. There are little differences, but not statistically relevant. And after 5 retreatment procedures, so disinfection, thermodisinfector, sterilization, all 3 instruments have lost 75% of their efficacy. So actually at the end, all 3 instruments were blunt exactly the same. Which means if we put it on a graph, that of course, so the normal instruments are the black ones, it's the Deppeler one. You will lose a little bit more sharp edges during usage. But once you have your 5 retreatments, which means 5 patients, basically, you can resharpen them, and the others you cannot. So you can choose between throwing them away or continue to use a blunt instrument. So, and in order to resharpen them, our method is like this. So the idea is along the blade and with the right angle. Along the blade because you can straighten up the string of the blade. And with the right angle in order to keep the geometry that is ergonomically useful. So basically, if you sharpen along the blade, you will remove all the bad things that we saw before. So you will have no burrs because you are sharpening along that blade. And so there are not creation of burrs. You have no ribbles, again, as you are along the blade. you cannot make ripples. There are no facets because you are following the curve of the blade. You have the correct angle because you have a much better control of it. So it keeps the geometry, and at the end you have more security, precision, and the instrument lasts longer. And actually the cutting edge of one sharpening will last longer. I've heard a lot of people saying to me, I have to resharpen during my treatment of the patient. And of course, if you sharpen against the cutting edge, you will make these little teeth and they will fall out very, very fast, and you have to resharpen much more often instead of if you straighten up the string of the blade. So it really changes a lot of the quality of the instrument during the usage. And in order to keep your instruments as good as possible and to have a better control, to understand the instrument, to change it if you want, it's good to have a look at them. I know it's much, you usually learn, or you have usually you just take the instrument and you check if it's sharp on a test stick or even if on your hand, but you don't look at them, because if you just check if they are sharp, okay, they are sharp, they are usable, but probably you changed the geometry, you made a bump into it or whatever. And if you don't look at them, you cannot correct this, and you will be working with instruments which are not the same as at the beginning. And of course, like, also if you look at the blades, you can learn, you can do a lot of things. And also it's a nice feeling when you have sharpened the instruments and they look so nice after sharpening. It's like tidying the room. It's always a good feeling. You don't like it at the beginning, but when it's all nice, you are happy. It's the same feeling. So the question that comes very often is how often I have to sharpen, or how long. So the only response is it depends. It depends on how long you wait before you resharpen, because the longer you wait, the longer you have to resharpen longer. So it's exponential. If you don't wait too much, so let's say the best would be after each patient. It's like the butcher. I'm sure you've all been to the butcher once and you've seen him sharpen his knives after nearly each client. So it's the same idea. When I speak about straighten up the string of the blade, it's just this small movement, this just one time back and forth, and that's it. It's no more. So it takes a few seconds and your instrument is okay, is perfect. As longer you wait, the longer you have to sharpen a long time. So again, it's better to do it very often. And what I mean with the string of the blade is this little piece on the figure on the left. You see that the point is just a little bit down. It's just looked down because it has just been misplaced a little bit because it was used. So sharpening it's just a question of iron this piece in order to put it up again. So this is what I mean with straighten up the string of the blade. On the other side, you have a blunt instrument that has been used far too much, and it will take a long time until you reach the cutting edge again. And this is very frustrating. So basically, the more often you sharpen, the better it is. What we like to say is between 1 or 5 patients. After 5 patients, you should resharpen your instruments. It also depends a little bit of what kind of patients, what kind of calculus, if you just use Gracies on recall treatments, etc. But basically, yeah, after 5 patients, it would be the right moment to resharpen. And this brings me to the geometry that we want to keep. This means the correct angle to keep as good as possible. And I like to take as an example in the morning when the car is full of ice and you have to remove this ice of your car window. You have to put the scratcher in a certain angle in order to make it efficient. And I'm sure you all had this experience that if you put too acute angle, you will jump over it or just keep stuck inside, but you cannot remove it. On the other hand, if it's too open, you will smooth it, burnish it instead of removing it. So you have to find the correct angle in order to be efficient. And for the dental instruments, as you're in the mouth and you don't see always where the tip is, the instruments are made to be used ergonomically. So the angle is made in order for you not to have to change your position too much and to be comfortable for you and the patient, of course. So that's why it's important to keep this angle as good as possible and to follow it. And so again, for the geometry, the angles, as you may know, 20 degrees for scalars and universal curettes and 30 degrees for Gracies. And what I mean with these 20 and 30 degrees is the distance between the stone and, so the angle between the stone and the first shaft, as you see here on the picture. So I'm sure this you all know. I will just go very fast. The scalar is pointy and sharp on both sides. It's for the upper side of the teeth. The universal curettes are rounded and symmetrically sharp on both sides. And the Gracie curettes, also called specifics, are rounded and are sharp only on one side. And they are not symmetrical, but diagonally oriented. So if you cut the tip, it will basically look a little bit like that. So it's important when you sharpen to know what you are sharpening. Regarding the stones, there are many different stones or methods of sharpening. Basically, you have the best one is the Arkansas translucent. It's a natural stone that is found in Arkansas in America. It's translucent, so you see the light through it, and it varies between white and gray colors. Then you have a black Arkansas. It's also quite hard. It's also a natural stone. It's both are very good stones. They are thin, they are smooth, they are efficient, they're really good. Then you have the ceramic stones. These are man-made. They have the quality to be very precise because they are squeezed into a form, so they are always the same size. They are also very good, but they will last a bit less longer because they will get used. I mean, with the time you will have some, how do you say that? you have like a little thing, basin inside because of the usage of the instrument. Then you have India stones. These are very coarse. You don't have to use oil on them because they have already enough. They are just useful for very bad instruments that are completely blunt and you have to redo the form practically. And if you use this kind of stone, it's important. It would be nice to finish with an Arkansas stone that is thin in order to avoid to make too much scratches on the blade. Then you have a silicon carbide stone. This is also quite coarse. It's also called carborundum. It's gray. It's also a man-made stone, and this is actually very useful for titanium curettes, because titanium being a very soft material, if you use a very thin, smooth stone, you will not remove the material right away. You will smooth it. It works. It's not something you shouldn't do. But we found that the silicon carbide is really the best stone to use for titanium. But of course, with care, not too much force, and then it's really the best way to do it. And there are other materials that exist. There are pads with diamond coating and other things. But we like the stones, and also because they fit on our materials. So quick reminder, what we saw until now: check with a loop. What am I sharpening? What are the instruments? Have they been sharpened differently before? And always along the blade with the right angle. Then we will go a bit deeper into sharpening. What do I need for sharpening? So first of all, you need a stone, you need oil, you need instruments, of course, you need a cloth to remove the excess of oil, you need a loop that's really helpful, a good light, and a test stick. So the three last things are mainly to check what you've done, if it's sharp, if it's okay, and these three things really help. So our method looks like this. So you put the tip of the instrument in the axis of the stone, and then you move back and forth, making a little round between the fingers, turning the instrument between the fingers. This is with a scaler. With a Gracie, it looks actually the same, just with another angle. So always the tip in the axis of the stone and this movement back and forth rotating. And the position looks like this. You have to steady the elbows in order to get some fixity, and hold the stone in the axis of your eyes. Because if you hold the stone like this, so you see, you don't see the complete stone, but just this part, the front of the stone, and so you can see if the angle is correct. Actually, you can see if the blade of the instrument is adjacent to the stone, and this gives you the right angle. From above, it looks like this. Mostly the instrument will be perpendicular to the stone, but don't sharpen looking on the instrument and looking on it like this, because you will not see the angle. So you really have to look at this, have this position like on the left picture. And the tip should always face the thumb or the index. So look up or down and be in the axis of the stone. The movement of the tip looks like this. And the handle like this. Combining with the up and down movement. So another picture with other instruments, if you have a sickle, for example, a sickle curette, you can go a little bit around. But really, what we look for is following the blade. Always follow the blade and follow the structure of the instrument in order to straighten up the string of the blade. You can look at it as you want, as long as you do the right movement. And don't be too much afraid about the angle. It's difficult to reach the right angle, but even if you are not perfect, it really changes the quality of the blade if you sharpen this way around. And you can really try. The only thing you can do really wrong with this method is to go a little bit too much on the tip. So be careful not to turn the instrument too much. Then with the Gracie, and as you see, always, whatever instrument I use, the tip is always looking up or looking down and following the axis of the stone. Then you have Gracie 1112. It is the same. And what you can do also to check if you have the right angle, you can put some waterproof pencil and on the blade and do 2-3 times back and forth, and then you see exactly where you removed the color, and then you can adapt your angle. This is the best way to learn and check, and it's very good. And then of course, you have to sharpen the tip also sometimes. Simply put the stone on the table and do this movement back and forth. This will really help you to have a good rounded tip. And again, another instrument. You can look at the tip of the instrument and then choose if you want to do it. You don't need to do it every time. Only do it when it's needed. So if it's pointy, if it's if it has tips that look, or if it's squared, then you have to do this. If not, don't do it, because you will shorten the instrument too much. So this is just with stone and instrument, and this is actually the basis of our method. Now, to help, we have a coach. We call it a coach. It's actually a guide, which helps you to have the right angle. And we have two, of course, because there are two different angles, Gracie or universal. Gracie for Gracie curettes and universal for scalers and universal curettes. And basically the idea is to hide the angle with the first shaft of the instrument. And again, the tip has always to be in the axis of the stone and look to your thumb or to the coach. And of course you will need, you will need some oil again. This is always useful, the oil. It's there to smoothen the surface. And it's really, really useful to clean the stone. So once you have a lot of instruments to sharpen, and even in between, you can use a lot of oil and remove the excess of steel particles with a cloth. But don't leave a lake of oil on it, because it will make something like a pasta, a black pasta, and this is not useful at all. And so the idea is, with the first shaft, you hide this angle. So it's actually, basically, it's a guide, a hint to help you to keep the instrument with the correct angle. And don't be afraid if it's not perfect. It will be far better than before. And then you can test it on a test stick. Also here, you don't have to scale the test stick, just if it hooks inside, it's okay, it's enough. And look with a loop if the blade is okay. So this is about the manual way of doing. We also have a device that helps you even more. It's always the same idea, the same method. It's just that with the Easy Sharp device, you have a perfect angle. It's really, really precise. You have the same instrument as a new one during its whole life. So I show you the video. I hope you hear.
The aim of this video is to teach you how to use the Easy Sharp appliance. It will also allow you to understand our method and to keep your
Please tell me if you don't hear
throughout their life
with the
cycle.
chat.
The Deppeler method relies on two key elements. One, the sharpening follows the structure of the steel and the curve of the blade. Two, maintaining a precise angle. Steel has a structure similar to that of wood. It is important to respect this structure and therefore sharpen by following it. You will then create a smoother surface and plane the blade's cutting edge. The cutting edge lasts longer thanks to this method. Here's an example of poor sharpening. The instrument has multiple facets and the blade's cutting edge is serrated. To you, the blade will appear to be extremely sharp, but the micro teeth quickly become blunt and the instrument must be sharpened more often. After sharpening with the Easy Sharp, you will obtain this result. Don't hesitate to look at the tips of your instruments with a magnifying glass to check their state before and after sharpening. You will need the following: the Easy Sharp appliance, the table of angles and movements, a black rubber spacer supplied with the appliance, sharpening oil, a test stick, and of course the instruments you want to sharpen. Start by putting a few drops of oil onto your stone and spread it around using a clean cloth. This simple gesture will guarantee an optimal surface condition for your blades. For angles close to 0, add a spacer to raise the stone. Let's take the M23 universal scaler. Put the instrument on the support and adjust it according to its length. It must be able to turn on itself, but mustn't move back and forth. Look for the reference M23 on the list. The first angle is 2 degrees to the left. Adjust the angle as indicated and block it by tightening the screw. Check that the angle you have adjusted corresponds to the cutting edge you want to sharpen. With this adjustment at 2 degrees, you have to lift the instrument to be able to put the blade on the stone. Check the movements to be made with the stone on one hand and with the instrument on the other. For the M23 scaler, turn the instrument on itself alternately to follow the curve of the blade and slide the stone from the bottom up, following the rectilinear movement. Don't forget that with this adjustment of 2 degrees, you have to lift the instrument to be able to place the blade on the stone. Use the same method to sharpen the second cutting edge. Adjust the angle, check the movements, and perform for both sides. The sharpening of an M23 scaler can be done in 45 seconds. Check the angle, check that the blade is well positioned on the stone, and perform the movements as indicated. To know what's the aim of this video,
Oops. So actually, the video is on YouTube, so you can watch the complete video all the time, anytime you want. Basically, also what you can do if you have more instruments, in order to gain time, you take all your M23, so you don't have to change the angle all the time, and so you gain a lot of time. So basically, I'm at the end of my presentation. I am at your service for any questions. I hope there will be a lot.